Section 9 of Library Essays, Papers Related to the Work of Public Libraries. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Leinhart. Library Essays, Papers Related to the Work of Public Libraries by Arthur Elmore Bostwick. Old Probabilities in the Library. His Modest Vaticinations, Part 2. The lessons of the past and of the present all point to the increasing use of the library as a great engine of popular education, using the noun in its broadest sense and emphasizing the adjective. The library is more and more a great humanizing influence. If this is so, nothing human must be alien to it, and much that is human and humanizing is nevertheless ephemeral. With some, the implications of this word are wholly contemptuous. Of a day, does nothing valuable pass quickly away, having done its little work? The day itself is a day only, and vanishes with the evening and the morning, yet it has its part in the record of the years. So with ephemeral literature. As we have seen, a great deal of what we are wont to consider as standard and permanent will ultimately perish. Yet be its life that of a year or a century, a book may play its little part in the mental development of those who read it. Just at present, the favorite vehicle of literary expression is fiction. People put into stories what they have to say of history, sociology, and ethics. They embody in romance their theories of aesthetics, economics, and politics. There is good doctrine with a poor literary setting, and there are paste jewels in pure gold. But taking it by and large, the much-decreed deluge of modern fiction has undoubtedly been educative in its tendency. This is why I cannot yield to logic and predict the gradual disappearance of all but a small residuum of fiction from the public library. There is a tendency in that direction, but there are some signs of a reaction. The seer may hope, even if he dare not predict, that the great public library that can afford to do so will continue to purchase such fiction as will interest or entertain the average person of education, even if it is to stay on the shelves but a few months. What will be the future distribution of libraries in this country? At present, their numbers are large in the northern states and comparatively small in the southern. Growth has been unexampled in its rapidity and has been stimulated by large benefactions. So far as this growth may be looked upon as the direct result of Mr. Carnegie's gifts, it may doubtless be regarded as abnormal, although it should be noted that every Carnegie building means a present and future outlay on the part of the community in which it stands, of many times the amount given by the donor. Primarily, library expansion is the result of a popular conviction that the public library is a public necessity. Expansion has proceeded in proportion to the spread of that conviction and along the lines of its progress. If there are fewer public libraries in the South than in the North, it is because the need for them is not felt there, even if it exists. Doubtless the race problem is a powerful inhibitory influence. Two things are certain: that library expansion is to go on for some time, and that a time will come when it must stop. When that time arrives, the library will have attained its majority, and we shall have an opportunity to address ourselves to problems that cannot be attended to during our period of growth. Who will use our great library of the future? Who uses the library of today? I have been asked that question by reporters and have been puzzled to answer it. For whose use is the public library intended? It will be logical to answer the public, of course, but there are a great many people who will give this answer with mental reservations. With them, the public means some particular part of the public. Some think that the libraries are for the poor, or at any rate for those who cannot afford to buy books for themselves. This is a survival of the origin of some of our circulating libraries, which were originally charities. But a public foundation and a charitable foundation are two different things. Our parks are free, yet we do not object to their free use by the wealthy, nor do the wealthy classes themselves seem to shrink from it. Some again would limit the use of a library to students, or at all events to those who do not care to withdraw books for home use. These are people who do not believe in the circulating library, and there are still such. Others again would have the public library cater only to those of educated literary taste. For these reasons, and for others, it is a fact that our public libraries, even those with the largest circulations, are not used by the entire public. Probably, however, they are being used more and more freely. In a library that uses the two-book system, it is impossible to tell exactly from statistics how many persons are drawing from the library at one time. Assuming, however, that the number is proportional to the number of books outstanding, we find in the New York Public Library that it has been increasing a little faster of late years than the circulation. In other words, individual reading has not increased, and the great recent increase of circulation in our library and presumably in others also is due to an increase of readers. The size of the library's public is therefore increasing, and there is no reason to suppose that it will not continue to do so. Of course, there must be a limit. For instance, certain sections of the public will not use a library, as they will not use a school, in conjunction with other sections. This may be because of social or racial feeling, or personal uncleanliness or offensiveness, even when the latter is not carried to the point where the librarian can properly object to it. In such cases, the lower element will drive out the higher. The remedy seems to be sought in segregation. This may be either open and acknowledged, as in those southern cities where the library has a separate department for colored people, or it may be virtual, as where a convenient lounging room with newspapers is provided for the tramp element, sometimes with the privilege of smoking. In large cities, the branch library system acts in the same way. The character of the cardholders is determined by that of the surrounding district, and we thus get practically separate libraries for separate sections of the community. I look to see this separation proceed to a somewhat greater degree, not perhaps systematically, but automatically and almost involuntarily. In spite of the apparent concession to class feeling, it will certainly increase the aggregate use of the library and thus make it more truly a public institution. So far as the branch system is concerned, of course, this is only one of the ways in which it increases the size of the library's public. Even in a section where the population is perfectly homogeneous, more people will always be served by two libraries than by one. The number of branch library systems is rapidly increasing, and the prospects are that the greatest possible use is to be made of them in the future. And they will be made up of true branches. Delivery stations have their uses, but they can never take the place of buildings with permanent stocks of books and all the conveniences of a separate library. Where a branch library is also a delivery station, as it always should be, that is, where the users of a branch are allowed to draw on the stock of the central library or of the other branches, it is found that the branch use vastly exceeds the station use. In our own library, a branch that circulates 500 to 1,000 of its own books daily will give out only 2 or 3 from other branches. This is sufficiently indicative of the preferences of the public, and in a matter of this kind, public preference will ultimately govern. These branch libraries will have limited stocks of books, mostly, though not entirely, on open shelves, and will include small reference collections, which will be more important as the branch is farther removed from the central library. These predictions, it seems to me, are all warranted by present tendencies. How will the future library be governed and administered? The governing body at present is almost universally a board of trustees who are men of standing and responsibility, but usually without expert knowledge. These are sometimes semi-independent and sometimes under the direct control of their municipal government. The present tendency seems to be to minimize municipal control, but to increase the number of governing bodies subject to it. In other words, private libraries are doing more public work than formerly under contract with municipalities, becoming thereby subject to the control of the city or town, but not so closely as to bring politics into the management. This state of things is so desirable that we may expect it to be multiplied in the future. As regards the lay or inexpert character of the governing body, though it is looked upon by some as objectionable, it is shared by the library with great numbers of other public and semi-public institutions. Such a board may be regarded as representative of the great lay public, on whose behalf the institution must be operated, and whose members are interested in results rather than in the special methods by which these results may be obtained. That the members of such a board should be mere figureheads is certainly not to be desired. That they should, either as individuals or collectively, take part in the details of administration is equally undesirable. There are boards that are doing the one or the other of these things, but the tendency is to lean neither in the direction of laxity nor of undue interference, to require definite results, and to hold the librarian strictly responsible for the attainment of those results, leaving him to employ his own methods. And the librarian of the future, who and what will he be? The difference between the modern librarian and him of the old school has often been the subject of comment. The librarian nowadays is less the scholar and more the man of affairs. Is change to go on in this direction? There are rather, it seems to me, signs of a reaction. Perhaps reaction is hardly the word. The librarian, while keeping in touch with the times, is reaching back for a little of the spirit of the old-time custodian and incorporating it with his own. Is it too much to hope that the heads of our future libraries will keep in the forefront of library progress, alert to appreciate the popular need and to respond to it, may yet have something of the sweet and gentle spirit of the old scholars who used to preside over our storehouses of books? Who are to be the assistants in our library of the future? At present, our staffs are recruited from the following sources. 1. The library schools. The best of these have supplied chiefly the heads of the smaller libraries and heads of departments or assistants of the higher grades in the larger libraries. Few heads of the large libraries are school graduates, and few lower-grade assistants. There are, however, schools of the second class whose graduates have gone into the lower grades, both in small and large institutions. 2. Apprentice classes, generally formed to instruct untrained persons in the work of a particular library, so that those who enter its lower grades may be at least partially fitted for their work. The best of these rise by promotion to the upper grades. 3. Appointment of totally untrained persons. If such persons are thoroughly well educated, they may enter the work in the higher grades or even as the heads of libraries. B. If not, they generally enter at the bottom, although of course some obtain higher positions through political or local influence. This, I believe, states the situation fairly. What are the tendencies? There can be no doubt that the library school is growing in favor. The increasing numbers of those who apply for school courses, the raising of requirements, both for entrance and for graduation, the second-class schools that have sprung up in limitation of those of higher grade, making necessary the appointment of committees by various library bodies to examine and report on them, all point in this direction. At the same time, we have had numerous instances of late of the selection of non-graduates to fill high library positions, and at least one instance of frank statement on the part of a librarian of acknowledged eminence in favor of taking college men of ability into the library immediately on graduation, instead of putting them through a library school. The library schools aim, and very properly so, at occupying the same position toward the library profession that the medical and law schools do toward the medical and legal professions. Statistics show that they have not yet reached that position. Still, it is probable that they will continue to approximate to it as a limit. In the future, more and more of the higher library positions will doubtless be filled by library school graduates, and so also will more of the lower positions. When the demand for assistance in the higher grades begins to slacken proportionately to the supply, as it is sure to do some day, the library school graduates will be willing to enter the library force in the lower grade, and will thus crowd out the untrained or partially trained applicants to some extent. They may even make the apprentice class a superfluity, in which case I am sure librarians will abandon it without a sigh. In these somewhat desultory forecasts, the object of the prophet has been not so much to impress upon others his own beliefs as to stimulate a taste for prophecy, a desire to glance over the rail and see which way the current is setting. Without being fatalists, we may hold that there are certain great tendencies in human affairs, vast social currents against which it is well nigh hopeless to struggle. Those who desire to accomplish results must work with these currents, not against them. Success has almost always been won in this way. Even when a few bold spirits have seemed to stem and turn back the whole tide, it will generally be found that an unseen undercurrent was in their favor. Learn therefore to judge of the currents. So shall we avoid the rocks and shoals and bring our craft safely to port. End of section 9.